What happens when America's most beloved tough guy with a heart of gold sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to discover the host has a completely different agenda? What unfolds is one of the most shocking confrontations in television history. A battle of principles that left audiences stunned and one major celebrity permanently banned from ever returning to the show. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below letting me know what you think about this situation. Because trust me, you're going to have some strong opinions by the end of this video. Terry Crews walked into the Ed Sullivan Theater that evening with his trademark smile, the same infectious energy that had made him a household name. From his days on Brooklyn 99 to his hosting gigs and his powerful advocacy work, the audience was already buzzing with excitement, phones out, ready to capture what they expected would be another charming appearance from one of Hollywood's most genuinely likable personalities. Stephen Colbert emerged from behind his desk with what appeared to be his usual welcoming demeanor. But something felt different. The handshake lasted a beat too long. The smile seemed forced, and there was an edge in his voice that regular viewers might have missed. But Terry picked up on immediately. "Terry Crews, everybody," Colbert announced to the cheering crowd. "The man who can bench press a car and somehow still be the most sensitive guy in the room." Terry laughed along with the audience, settling into the guest chair. "Well, Stephen, I don't know about bench pressing cars," he replied, "but I definitely try to lift people up whenever I can." "Oh, that's interesting," Colbert replied, his tone shifting slightly. "Because I've been reading some of your recent interviews, and it seems like you've been doing quite a bit of talking about lifting people up, haven't you?" The audience sensed something in the air, a tension that wasn't part of the usual late-night banter. Terry's expression remained pleasant, but his posture straightened slightly. "I think it's important to use whatever platform you have to help others," Terry responded carefully. "Whether that's talking about mental health, supporting survivors of abuse, or just encouraging people to be better versions of themselves." Colbert leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk. Right. And you've been very vocal about your own experiences, haven't you? Very public about some very personal struggles." "I believe in transparency," Terry said, his voice still warm but becoming more measured. "When you've been through something difficult, sharing your story can help others who might be going through the same thing." "Transparency is fascinating," Colbert mused, "because it assumes that your version of events is the only version that matters, doesn't it?" The audience grew quieter, sensing this wasn't going where they expected. Terry's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I can only speak for my own experience, Stephen. I would never claim to speak for anyone else. But you do speak for others, don't you?" Colbert pressed, leaning forward now. "You speak for survivors. You speak for victims. You position yourself as some kind of spokesperson for an entire movement." Terry's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "I speak from my experience. And if that helps other people feel less alone, then I'm grateful for that opportunity." "Grateful," Colbert repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's interesting, because some people might say that you've built quite a career on being grateful, haven't you? The grateful victim. The thankful survivor. The humble hero who just wants to help." The audience was now completely silent, confused by the hostile turn the interview had taken. Terry's hands, which had been relaxed on the armrests, slowly clenched into fists. "I'm not sure what you're trying to imply here, Stephen." "I'm not implying anything," Colbert said with a cold smile. "I'm asking directly. Don't you think there's something a little convenient about how your personal trauma has become such a central part of your public brand?" Terry stood up slowly, his full height and presence suddenly dominating the small space between them. The audience gasped audibly. "Convenient?" Terry's voice was low, controlled, but there was steel in it now. "You think what I went through was convenient?" Colbert didn't back down, remaining seated, but tilting his head up to maintain eye contact. "I think you've made it convenient. I think you've taken something that happened to you and turned it into a marketing strategy. You need to be very careful about what you say next," Terry warned, his voice still quiet, but carrying an unmistakable threat. "Or what?" Colbert challenged, finally standing to face him. "You'll do what exactly? Have another emotional breakdown on television? Write another inspirational Instagram post about overcoming adversity?" The audience was in complete shock, some people starting to boo, others simply staring in disbelief at what they were witnessing. Terry took a step closer to Colbert's desk, his massive frame casting a shadow over the smaller man. "You want to know what I'll do?" Terry asked, his voice rising for the first time. I'll tell you exactly what kind of person you really are, Stephen. I'll tell everyone watching what it looks like when someone uses their platform not to build people up, but to tear them down for entertainment. Colbert's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like satisfaction, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment all along. He stepped around his desk, closing the distance between them even further. Oh, please enlighten us all, Terry. Tell us what kind of person I really am. Because from where I'm sitting, I see someone who's made a very comfortable living playing the victim card whenever it's convenient. The audience was now audibly uncomfortable, with scattered murmurs and someone calling out, "This isn't right," from the back of the theater. But the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what was becoming television history, for all the wrong reasons. Terry's chest rose and fell slowly, his breathing controlled but his anger clearly building. You want to talk about playing cards, Stephen? Let's talk about the card you're playing right now. The cynical host card. The guy who thinks being cruel makes him clever. Cynical? Colbert laughed, but there was no humor in it. I prefer realistic. And the reality is that you've turned your trauma into a brand. Your pain into profit. Your struggle into a storyline that keeps you relevant. You don't know what you're talking about. Terry shot back, his voice getting louder. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about other people's lives, other people's pain. And you think that gives you the right to judge how someone else processes their experiences? Collar shrugged, seemingly unfazed by Terry's growing anger. I think it gives me the right to ask questions that other people are too polite to ask. Like why every interview you do somehow circles back to your personal struggles. Why every project you're involved in gets tied to your survivor story. Because those struggles made me who I am, Terry replied, his fists now visibly clenched at his sides. Because pretending they didn't happen would be dishonest. Because there are people out there going through the same things who need to know they're not alone. Or because it's good for business, Collar countered smoothly. Let's be honest here, Terry. Your career was pretty much stagnant before you started sharing all these personal details. Suddenly you're the go-to guy for every conversation about masculinity, about vulnerability, about overcoming adversity. Quite the career renaissance, wouldn't you say? The audience was getting restless now, with more people voicing their disapproval. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone," while another person yelled, "This is disgusting." But Colbert seemed energized by the chaos, feeding off the tension he had created. Terry took another step forward, now close enough that he was leaning over Colbert's desk. You want to know what's disgusting, Stephen? What's disgusting is using your platform to attack someone for having the courage to be vulnerable. What's disgusting is trying to shame someone for sharing their story because you're too cowardly to examine your own. My own what? Colbert asked, his voice taking on a mocking tone. My own trauma? My own struggles? Sorry to disappoint you, Terry, but some of us deal with our problems privately instead of turning them into content. No, Stephen, Terry said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger and disappointment. Some of you bury your problems so deep that you become bitter. Cynical people who can only feel better about themselves by tearing others down. Some of you turn into bullies who hide behind humor and claim you're just asking tough questions. Colbert's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of something genuine crossing his face before the calculated cruelty returned. Bullies? That's rich, coming from someone who uses his size and his soba story to intimidate people into agreeing with him. Intimidate people? Terry's voice rose to a roar now, causing several audience members to jump in their seats. You think I'm trying to intimidate people by talking about the worst moments of my life? You think I enjoy reliving trauma for the entertainment of strangers? I think you enjoy the sympathy, Colbert replied coldly. I think you enjoy being seen as the strong man who can cry, the tough guy with feelings. I think you figured out that vulnerability sells just as well as machismo, maybe better. Terry slammed his hand down on Core's desk with such force that papers scattered and the host's coffee mug rattled. The sharp crack echoed through the now silent theater. You want to see the real me, Stephen? You want to see what happens when someone pushes me too far? Because you're about to find out what I'm really like when I stop being polite. For the first time since the interview began, Colbert looked genuinely unsettled. He took a small step backward, but his voice remained steady, though perhaps a bit less confident than before. There it is, he said quietly. There's the real Terry Crews. The angry man underneath all that inspirational Instagram wisdom. The guy who solves problems with his fists when his feelings get hurt. My feelings? Terry's laugh was harsh and bitter. You think this is about my feelings being hurt? This is about you being a small, pathetic man who gets his kicks from trying to destroy people who are trying to do something positive in the world. The audience was in complete uproar now, with people standing up, some heading for the exits, others shouting at Colbert to stop. The security guards looked uncertain, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation continue. Positive. Colbert pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. Is it positive to make every conversation about yourself? To turn every interview into therapy? To use your platform to constantly remind everyone about your victim status? Victim status? Terry repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want to talk about victim status, Stephen? Let's talk about how you're about to become one if you don't shut your mouth right now. The threat hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Collar's producer could be seen frantically gesturing from offstage, but neither man was paying attention to anything except each other. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, Collar announced to the chaos, his voice cutting through the noise. The inspirational Terry Crews threatening physical violence because someone dared to question his narrative. Terry leaned across the desk until he was inches from Colbert's face. You want a narrative, Stephen? Here's your narrative. You're a washed-up comedian who's so desperate for attention that you'll attack good people just to create a moment. You're a coward who hides behind a desk and a fake smile while you try to destroy someone who's actually trying to help people. Help people. Collar shot back, finding his courage again in his anger. You help people the same way a politician helps people, by making it all about you. By making sure everyone knows how much you've suffered, how much you've overcome, how inspiring you are. You know what's inspiring, Stephen? Terry asked, his voice filled with contempt. What's inspiring is that after everything I went through, after all the reasons I had to become bitter and angry and cruel, I chose to try to lift people up instead. What's inspiring is that I didn't let my pain turn me into someone like you. The words hit Colbert like a physical blow, and for a moment his carefully constructed facade cracked completely. His face flushed red, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of his desk. The theater had fallen into an eerie quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Someone like me? Colbert repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying more venom than when he had been shouting. Someone like me? You don't know anything about me, Terry. You don't know what I've been through, what I've survived, what I've had to overcome. Terry straightened up slightly, sensing something different in Colbert's tone, but his anger was still burning too hot for him to back down. Then maybe you should try talking about it instead of attacking people who do. Maybe you should try being honest about your own pain instead of using other people's as target practice. Honest. Collar's laugh was sharp and bitter. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I've been doing this job for years, watching people like you parade your trauma across my stage like it's some kind of achievement. I've smiled and nodded and asked the right questions while inside I'm thinking, why do you get to be the hero of your story while the rest of us just have to suffer in silence? The audience was completely silent now, transfixed by what they were witnessing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was two men tearing each other apart on live television. Nobody asked you to suffer in silence, Stephen, Terry replied, his voice still angry but now carrying a note of something else, something that might have been pity. Nobody said you couldn't tell your story too. But that's not what this is about, is it? This isn't about you wanting to share your pain. This is about you resenting that someone else found a way to turn their pain into something positive. Positive? Collar spat. You call this positive? You call making a career out of your victimhood positive? You call turning every conversation into a therapy session positive? I call trying to help people positive, Terry shot back. I call using whatever platform you have to make sure other people don't feel alone positive. I call refusing to let the worst things that happen to you define you in a negative way positive. But they do define you, Colbert insisted, his voice rising again. Everything you do, every role you take, every interview you give, it all comes back to your trauma. You can't exist without it. You can't be Terry Crews without being Terry Crews the survivor, Terry Crews the victim, Terry Crews the inspiration. And what are you without your bitterness, Stephen? Terry asked pointedly. What are you without your cynicism and your cruelty? Who is Stephen Colbert when he's not tearing other people down to make himself feel better? Collar went completely still, his face pale now instead of flushed. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You think because you cry on television and talk about your feelings, that makes you some kind of saint. I don't think I'm better than anyone, Terry replied firmly. But I know I'm better than I used to be. I know that sharing my story has helped people. I know that being vulnerable has made me stronger, not weaker. And I know that trying to help others is better than trying to hurt them. Help them. Kor's voice was getting shrill now, his composure completely shattered. You help them by making them think that talking about their problems is the solution to everything? You help them by convincing them that they should put their worst moments on display for everyone to judge. I help them by showing them they're not alone, Terry said, his voice steady and strong despite his anger. I help them by proving that you can survive the worst things that happen to you and still choose to be a good person. I help them by showing them that strength isn't about hiding your pain. It's about not letting your pain turn you into someone cruel. Cruel, Colbert repeated, shaking his head. You want to talk about cruel? What's cruel is making people think that if they just share their trauma, if they just open up about their pain, everything will magically get better. What's cruel is selling hope to people who need real help. And what do you sell, Stephen? Terry demanded. What do you offer people? Cynicism? Bitterness? The idea that caring about others makes you weak? The belief that vulnerability is just manipulation? I sell reality, Colbert snapped. I sell the truth, that life is hard and unfair, and that most people are just trying to get through it without making a spectacle of themselves. No, Terry said, shaking his head. You sell despair. You sell the idea that nothing matters and nobody really cares, and that anyone who says different is lying. You sell the poison that you've been drinking for so long that you can't taste anything else. The accusation hung in the air between them, and for a moment Colbert looked almost vulnerable himself, as if Terry's words had found their mark. But then his face hardened again, and when he spoke, his voice was colder than it had been all night. Get out, he said quietly. What? Terry asked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. I said get out, Kor repeated louder this time. Get off my stage. Get out of my theater. I don't want to look at you anymore. Terry stared at him for a long moment, his anger slowly transforming into something that looked like disappointment and sadness. This is what you do, isn't it, Stephen? When someone gets too close to the truth, when someone makes you look at yourself too clearly, you just make them go away. Security. Collar called out, his voice echoing through the silent theater. Remove Mr. Cruz from the building. 2 security guards approached hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. They looked between Terry and Colbert uncertainly. It's okay, Terry said to them, his voice calm. I'll leave. But first, I want to say something to the people watching at home. He turned to face the cameras directly, his imposing figure filling the frame. If you're watching this and you're struggling with something, if you're dealing with pain or trauma or just trying to figure out how to be a better person, don't let what you've seen here tonight discourage you. Don't let anyone tell you that sharing your story makes you weak or that asking for help makes you a victim. Turn off the cameras. Colbert ordered his crew, but they seemed frozen, unsure whether to follow his instructions or keep recording this unprecedented moment. Terry continued, ignoring Colbert completely now. The truth is that healing is hard work, and it's scary, and sometimes people will try to tear you down for doing it. But you don't heal by staying silent. You don't get stronger by pretending you're not hurt. And you don't help anyone by becoming so bitter that you can't stand to see other people finding their way out of the darkness. I said, turn off the cameras, Colbert repeated, his voice cracking slightly. Stephen, Terry said, turning back to face the host one last time. I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because whatever happened to you, whatever made you this angry and bitter and cruel, you didn't deserve it. But you also don't get to make other people pay for it. You don't get to try to drag other people down into that darkness with you. Colbert's hands were shaking now, and tears were visible in his eyes, though his face remained hard. Just go, he whispered. Please, just go. Terry nodded slowly, then turned and walked toward the exit. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and looked back one more time. The invitation is always open, Stephen, he said quietly. If you ever want to talk about what's really eating you up inside, if you ever want to try healing instead of hurting, I'll listen. No cameras. No audience. Just 2 people trying to figure out how to be better. And with that, Terry Crews walked off the stage, leaving behind a shattered host, a traumatized audience, and one of the most shocking moments in television history. Colbert stood alone behind his desk for a long moment, staring at the spot where Terry had been standing. Then, without another word, he turned and walked off his own stage, leaving his bewildered crew and audience sitting in stunned silence. The cameras finally stopped rolling. But the damage was done. In the span of one interview, two men had exposed their deepest wounds on live television, and only one of them had walked away with his dignity intact. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Terry Crews right to stand up to Stephen Colbert's attacks? Or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Shoaib Buzzer Stories for more shocking celebrity showdowns you won't see anywhere else.